Hey guys, today we'll be talking about the hardships the United States faced during the 1920s and 30s and how it began to favor isolationism. We begin by talking about the United States after World War I and how it started favoring a more isolationist mindset. Because after the Treaty of Versailles, the United States got the benefit of the stick because their country wasn't ravaged by the war. And after the hardships of World War I, they didn't want to enter into another war, and they didn't want any country to be too strong. So with that, they set up the Washington Conference, and what the Washington Conference did was it wanted to limit the naval arms race of other nations. An influential treaty signed at the Washington Conference was the Five-Power Naval Limitation Treaty, which scrapped 2,000 tons of warships from the five great powers. This was done so no one country could be too powerful. Now we move on to Germany and its reparations it had to pay. It had to pay a lot of reparations, and with their country being ravaged by the war, it became increasingly difficult for them to do that. So the vice president at the time, Charles Dawes, came up with an idea to help Germany pay for the reparation. He called it the Dawes Plan. It helped Germany pay back the reparations. So the US loaned Germany some money, and then Germany used that money to pay Britain and France in reparations, and Britain and France paid the US back for war loans. And the money came back to the US. And now another very influential act was the Kellogg-Briand Act, or the Pact of Paris, which basically said that war could not be the final resolve to any conflict. So it's saying that no conflict can be resolved by war. So it's saying no war whatsoever. But as many of you know, with World War II around the corner, this act really didn't have any power, and it failed. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was one of the most influential individuals from this time period. He paved the way for American isolationism during the 1930s. Now, domestically, he created the New Deal and, saved the United States from a Great Depression, but on foreign affairs, he created the Neutrality Acts, which basically limited trade with Europe or any other nations, setting, the stage for isolationism because affairs with Europe were hard and you needed a special license to trade with Europe. Now, in one of his most famous speeches, the quarantine speech, he's basically calling out aggressor nations, saying that they should be quarantined. And he got a lot of criticism from people, especially the America First Committee, which was basically anti-FDR. They did not like him. And one of their main goals was to keep the US out of a certain war during European affairs because tensions were high. And one of the most prominent speakers for the America First was Charles Lindbergh. And for those of you who don't know, he is a pilot from Louisiana who got really famous after flying from New York City all the way to Paris, because that's what gets you famous in the 1920s. But anyways, one of his most important speeches is basically calling out FDR for seeking a third term just for war purposes. And people think he's just spreading Nazi-Semitism. He is hated by pro-war activists. And in spite of this, FDR passes the Lend-Lease Act. And what the Lend-Lease Act does, it allows the United States to send in aid in terms of food and all that to the Allies, completely ignoring the Neutrality Acts and any other neutrality-minded thinking the United States has. So people say this really aided the Allies, while other people say this pushed them closer to war. And on December 7th, 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and after that, the US can't take any more, and FDR decides to join the war. The era that followed this was an era where the United States was very influential in world affairs, showing that this era was sort of a buffer period, and it shows that the United States has to be the policeman of the world.